Hello, and thank you for tuning into our channel once again. My name is Dennis Morris, and I'm the minister for the Church of Christ in Jefferson, Texas. We've been studying in the Gospel of John, and we're in John chapter 9. Jesus has healed the blind man. He healed the blind man on the Sabbath day, and that caused the Pharisees to have problems with Jesus. But this is not something that's new. This has happened before in connection with Jesus doing a miracle on the Sabbath day, and Jesus explaining himself that what he did was not wrong. And of course, we know that it was not wrong because Jesus, of course, is the Lord of the Sabbath. He knows what was and what was not right on the Sabbath. And so he was not condemned as far as God was concerned, and yet these men condemned him because they thought he had done something wrong based upon the commandments and the traditions of their fathers. Now, the blind man who was now healed had the opportunity to talk to the Pharisees. Matter of fact, the Pharisees called him into question. And they wanted to know, were you really blind? Did somebody heal you? How were you healed? And so they're trying to find out information. And yet we find that every time the blind man that was now healed answers them, it causes them to become more and more frustrated, and they become more and more angry, to the point that eventually they just cast him out from among them. Okay, they just didn't want to deal with him anymore. Now, as we pick up with our study there in John chapter 9 and verse 34, notice that Jesus then heard that they had cast this blind man who was now healed out from among them. And it says, and Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and when he had found him, he said unto him, dost thou believe on the Son of God? And so Jesus is now helping this man to draw a proper conclusion as to Jesus's identity, that he is the Son of God. And of course, as we said, the blind man did not see Jesus, neither did Jesus tell him who he was, or really to go into much detail at all, except making the clay out of the spittle, putting it upon his eyes, and then telling him to go and wash in the pool of Siloam. And so now, what do we find? Jesus finds him. He asks him the question, do you believe on the Son of God? Notice the answer that the blind man gave there in verse 36. He said, who is he, Lord, that I might believe on him? And so the blind man wants to know, well, if I need to believe on the Son of God, then let me know who he is so that I can. And then in verse 37, and Jesus said unto him, thou hast both seen him, and it is he that talketh with thee. Now, it's interesting that Jesus said, you have seen him. And the reason being is because Jesus had healed him of his blindness, and he was able to look upon Jesus. And then not only did he say, you have both seen him, but now you are talking with him, because Jesus indeed is the Son of God. Now the reaction of the man there in verse 38 is precious, because he said, Lord, I believe, and he worshiped him. And so could you imagine being born blind, and yet now, because of Jesus, you're able to see? But not just able to see physically because your eyes have been opened, but now being able to see spiritually because your eye of faith has been opened. You know who Jesus is, you know what he has done, you know that he is the Son of God, and as a result, that eye of faith now has been opened that you might be able to see. And Jesus really goes into more detail about that in the next 3 verses. Notice Jesus said, for judgment I am come into this world, that they which see not might see, and they which see might be made blind. Now, what in the world is he talking about here? Well, of course, he has healed the blind man that he might be able to see physically, but in telling him that he is Jesus, he has also helped him to see spiritually. And yet we find that the Jews, especially the Pharisees, thought that they were the ones who had their eyes open and that they could see spiritually. And yet we find that in the statement Jesus made is those individuals who thought that they could see spiritually, they were really blind. And as far as the Pharisees were concerned, they understood what Jesus was saying, because some of the Pharisees which were with him heard these words, and what did they say? Are we blind also? And so they knew that Jesus was, pointing to those individuals who thought they were able to see spiritually being the ones that were blind. Well, in verse 41, Jesus said unto them, if ye were blind, ye should have no sin, but now ye say, we see, therefore your sin remaineth. And so Jesus is trying to tell them, if you had the attitude of this blind man right here, if you had the kind of attitude that he has, then my friends, you would be able to see. And yet they did not have the desire to believe on Jesus, that he is the Son of God. And because of that, they then remained in their sins. Well, we're going to have a short devotional today, and hopefully it's been a good one for you. And we're going to continue with our study next time in John chapter 10, and I hope you have a blessed day.